Welcome to today's episode of Learning with Leaders. My guest today is Stephanie Wright, a former Henkel colleague of mine, and she's now very much into leadership and coaching. And the two main things which struck me during our conversation was her advice that even in younger professional times, you should dare to ask proactively, even for mentorship and support to more senior people to you. And the second one is don't be afraid to say no. And there are more ways, just the black type of saying no, but there are more gray areas where you can say no, but here I have a better suggestion or a different approach to a certain topic. I wish you a lot of enjoyment by listening to today's episode of Learning with Leaders. Welcome to today's episode of Learning with Leaders, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks, Taco. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course. Where are you located again now?
I'm in cloudy today, Paris, France.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Not a bad place to be.
No.
So Stephanie, so that's the first time that happened, but everything happens first time. So you are a supply chain and leadership professional. You have been working for big corporations like Ford and Henkel, and you also have been quite some time in procurement. So I hope that you haven't been too hard on salespeople.
Never.
Okay. So, and now you are very centered on leadership and mindfulness and well-being. So this is one of the main topics we will talk about today. But is there anything else you would like to add to your very rich vita?
Yeah, no, I think what I'm doing today is the synergy of those. So bringing mindfulness and respectful leadership into that space of supply chain and purchasing and just business in general.
Okay. So talking about mindfulness, what is your personal definition of it?
Yeah, sure. I think it is a very personal definition, because I think mindfulness for everyone is to be interpreted based on your own life and experience. But for me, it's really means to be aware of how your actions and your behaviors, and most importantly, your words, impact yourself and those around you. And I think with that awareness, you can shape your experiences the way that you want. So you can, pretty much shape any experience into a positive one, I believe, with that mindfulness that you can have inside.
And so connected to mindfulness, and especially, but not only, but especially during those, very interesting COVID times. When you look at young professionals, why is that so important also for young people to develop, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and to build a robust, resilient working attitude?
And I'm glad you brought up the word resilience, because I think that's a result of all of this, right? When you can ask yourself a question, how do you build resilience? And I think it links back to, start with mindfulness. And I think first, everybody has the capability of being mindful, because the skills behind mindfulness is really embedded in emotional intelligence, and we all have that in us. We all have the capability of being empathetic. And I think for young people, it's about starting to build that muscle of being mindful. And that really starts in self-awareness and understanding, yourself and your reaction to things, getting curious about why you think certain ways or react certain ways. And, there's so much wealth and richness in this door of discovering yourself. And I think at a young age, if you can spark this curiosity, especially young professionals, which Agora, we work a lot with young professionals. They say, how do we start, Stephanie? I said, well, first you're here. You're talking about wanting to know how to start.
Mm.
And I think that's the curiosity is the first step that I tell young professionals to get into, because the wealth of what's out there after you get curious is the exciting part.
So when I look back on my own career and I try to be again self-aware, so I often heard from people that they had to learn to say no.
Mhm.
So when I was younger, that was, I mean, not, I was never self-aware of that question anyway. So is that also already in younger times an important question to consider?
Absolutely, because I think, by the nature right now, young professionals are concerned that if they say no, will it reflect on their own resilience or wanting to experience or try new things? And then what happens is a lot of times that clouds the decision making of being true to self or alignment of values. Usually a young professional walks into a big corporation and they're excited about this opportunity,
Mm,
sometimes overwhelmed. And the first thing they learn is you have to learn the company values. And a lot of times the reflection is, and even when I think back to my 22-year-old self or 23-year-old self, are you really even aware of your own values? To be
mm,
able to make sure that what you say yes to and what you say no to aligns with who you are. And I think that's why it's important, Paco, and thank you for bringing that up, is this ability or this awareness of saying what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to.
mm.
And that does it build on what you want to fulfill as your purpose in business and in life? I think it's a really important question to ask.
Mm. A lot of those current, very modern topics like well-being, like diversity, like resilience, these buzzwords, 5 years ago were not so high on the agenda. So looking at those soft, buzzwords, how do they position against or in addition to very strong quantifiable business KPIs? What is your
Mhm.
view on that? Is that a contradiction anyway?
Yeah, I think, and again, it's for me, I don't believe it is. I actually think that employee well-being and business KPIs is absolutely synergetic. And I think this is what interests me when I talk to organizations or leaders of organizations, and they're hesitant to invest in employee well-being. And what does that really mean? It's
Mm,
can be a list of things, or that conversation starts normally within human resources when it's directly linked to business performance. And I think there's a lot of work for us to do as leaders to bring that to the table, and this discussion of when you have employee well-being, and there's a ton of data out there, Paco, as you said. Now it's everywhere. You open any magazine or publication, and it talks about the benefit of bringing employee well-being into specific performance-driven and sustainability, right? I
mm,
love the fact that mindfulness and employee well-being is becoming part of the conversation of sustainability, because it's 100% linked to the performance of your business. And I want to push my colleagues and leaders, let's say the more experienced leaders of today, to be brave enough to raise their hand and say, what if employee well-being of your team or the culture of your team is linked to your bonus or your performance review? And
mm,
that we make it a clear KPI of our leaders to be held accountable for ensuring that there is an atmosphere that is built on trust and creativity. And the compassionate leader is a really big discussion right now. um, and I think it's something that we have an opportunity to seize. Young professionals, and not just young professionals, but the whole workforce
mm,
is asking for it.
mm,
They're wanting to work for organizations that really take this seriously. And I
Mm.
think linking it to a business KPI is one way that, let's say, motivates those leaders that don't find it as critical
Mm.
to act, because that's what we have to do right now. We have to take action on it.
Yeah. Time has changed so much that, I was just thinking when you mentioned the word compassionate leader, 30 years ago, I'm almost sure that a lot of people would have associated compassionate with weak. But I obviously today,
Absolutely.
fortunately, that has changed, right? So looking, again, a little bit to your younger professional self. So what, if you look back, has changed from your own leadership style and approach from when you were 22, let's say, to 44?
I had the opportunity at 22, my first position in manufacturing, to lead a team. And it was a humbling experience. But I think it planted the seeds to my leadership style, 20 years later. And, I think what I learned is to have a healthy relationship with ego. I think sometimes we can get really wrapped up in that. Even this discussion of soft and hard styles and what works and what doesn't, and what we were raised in our generation, Paco, of what made it a successful leader was more the hard skills.
Yes.
And, we're trying to unlearn that. So we talk about young professionals, but as experienced leaders, we need to unlearn a lot of things that we were taught was the way to get there. And, I reminded myself through my career, going from 22 to 44, is that to have a healthy relationship in your leadership style, or the success of leadership, right? Because that, that can play a part in it, is to really tap into your instinct, your gut feeling. Don't just have it all in your head. A lot of times what seems to be the right way in your mind is not the right way if you tap into your heart and your stomach. And this is that synergy of mindfulness as well, of, especially, in supply chain, in my 20 plus years in supply chain, we were conductors of chaos. So, there's always a lot of tension. And even now, COVID has highlighted the grit and resilience and kind of the dirty work that supply chainers do. And we love it. It's why we do it. But that was one thing in my leadership that I grew from in this space of mindfulness and emotional intelligence, is what were the key values that my team had to work with, that was really a go, no go for me. And it was less about, did they meet a certain KPI at a certain time? Because there was a lot of chaos and moving pieces, but there was the installation of respect for the people, respect for the process, respect for all the layers of the organization. And because I think if that foundation of respect is lived, it's an automatic space of mindfulness. And then from there, that's where creativity, innovation, problem solving, continuous improvement comes from the people.
Yeah.
So that I think has been the growth pattern, or if I had to tell the story of my leadership career, that's what's been the most changing, but in a evolution kind of way.
Let me try to tap into one very concrete question and example on respect. So, on the one hand, you have somebody who is very conscious of personal data privacy. So he or she does not like that, somebody looks into his or her Outlook calendar to book a meeting. So I need to respect that. But on the other hand, the other person probably needs to also understand that this influences and impacts negatively the workflow. So where is the boundary there, between the both respectful, positions?
I think a lot of it, it's an interesting example. I think a lot of that comes from, what is the root cause of why the person is hesitant to show their calendar? And this is where, as a leader, the curiosity of really listening, scheduling a coffee break to very openly say, okay, is it about the calendar? What is the root cause? And listening as a leader. And this is, again, part of this mindfulness and emotional intelligence is listening and being all in, not judging where this person is coming from, but supporting the person to feel heard and understood. And I'm sure in those scenarios you can find out that it's more about wanting to create boundaries of maybe personal and professional, and how do you find solutions to do that. But whether it's color coding or hiding some certain calendar items, or creating a separate calendar of personal and private, and then also giving the person perspective, right? With respect and understanding and getting on an even playing field. A lot of it has to do with just understanding the perspective of where the people are coming from.
Yeah, interesting. Stephanie, again, tapping into your rich experience. So, can you give us a little bit more insights into where in your career you seized some opportunities and where perhaps you also missed the mark and
Sure.
you would do things even differently?
Yeah, great. Sure. So I was and still am a seizer of opportunity. So, my North Star, if you will, in my career and in my personal life has always been, why not? When I have been approached with, do you want to change organizations? Do you want to change companies? I was working for Ford Motor Company in at their headquarters. It was a fantastic organization and job and career. And it was this, let's see, why not? What could this opportunity bring me? So it's really, again, being curious about the experience of opportunities. Same with, do you want to move to Europe? Do you want to move, I've lived all over Europe in different countries. Do you want to change organizations going from purchasing to supply chain? And I think this why not attitude has led me to then experience by taking risks. And that experience, you gain confidence. That confidence, you gain wisdom. And that, it's a nice trajectory and a nice pattern that I've created for myself that's worked. And I think what I would redo over, because I'm not a person of regret, but I really believe, I appreciate all the things that have happened, failures or not. I think what I would redo is the exact same story over again. I think there would be even probably more lessons in repeating the same life over again. But I don't think I would erase any of it.
Good for you, Stephanie. Good for you. So you mentioned the term failure. This is also a term which is very intensively discussed these days. So what do you consider your sales failure, and how do you approach it in general?
Yeah, sure. I think I've learned the gift of failure. I think it is a difficult learning to call failures gifts. But that's something that over my life I have. I think if I reflect on my first real failure that has shaped me, it was not making the high school basketball team. And
What a failure, Stephanie! A disaster.
disaster for a 13-year-old, I can tell you it was a disaster, especially I'm coming from Detroit, Michigan. And if anybody knows American basketball in Detroit in the 80s were the Detroit Pistons.
Wow.
So they were, basketball was life. But that failure, funny enough, led me to running. And I was a runner throughout my high school sports career. And running now has served me my whole life. It's my think tank. It's my self-care time. It's where I find clarity. And what a gift out of a failure, right? That is, so those types of mindsets in failures is, I think, what we need to support younger people with as well. And this is in the encouragement of experience and mentors, young professionals finding mentors, finding coaches, exchanging story that failure has brought gifts and learning. And if you don't encourage failure, and I think this is some place where organizations and we as experienced leaders have some work to do, is masterizing the encouragement of failure and celebrating failures. Even now with younger people, before they get into the professional world, we give everybody a trophy.
That's
we're not giving service to young people to recognize that not getting the trophy or coming in second or not placing at all is actually a bigger learning and a bigger gift than the prize.
Still, Stephanie, let me dig a little deeper here. So on the one hand, we, and especially also in the arena of supply chain, we are optimizing processes. We are, really designing much more in smaller pieces. So in order to harmonize and processes and minimize risks and failures. On the other hand, we say, or leaders say, yes, we encourage, innovation and boldness. And honestly, I think this is still a very difficult call. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is where we as leaders say one thing and do and act differently. And the younger professionals are seeing that what we say and what we do are two different things. And this is where organizations have opportunity to build their talent pipeline when they not only say we encourage failure, but that when a young person walks into an organization, they see it and they feel it and they see the encouragement or the budgets set aside for failure, right? And this is because where especially in the supply chain world, Paco, you mentioned, I'm a Lean Six Sigma educated professional, and it's all about the failures.
Yes.
The gifts and the innovation and the improvement comes from the failure. And that's how we get better. And that's how we find the new innovative ways in process or human intelligence or combining the two together. So, we have kind of this dual thinking, and we have to unlearn that thinking. Yes. And prove it and show it, right? Because I think this is something that the younger professionals are demanding to be seen. They say, okay, you say, even in interviews, a young professional will say, okay, you say that you are an innovative organization. Can you give me an example how you celebrate failure? Do you budget for failure? And you see the leader on the other side kind of say, what do you mean? So
what exactly do you mean here? Yeah, I mean, what I said, right? I mean, give me an example. Yeah, that's a very interesting one, and it goes into also authentic leadership, right? It needs to be really congruent what you say and what you do. So we're almost at the end of our very interesting the discussion here. So if you look into the future and you think of young professionals, what advice would you give them to pull mindful leadership from their leaders? So if they are in a team position, how can they encourage mindful leadership?
I think ask for it. Get curious, be bold enough to say, how can we create a dialogue that fosters more communication? How can how can a young leader walk into their superior, their boss, or even their N+2 and say, I want to encourage and influence innovation with my peer group. How can we collaborate together to make sure that happens? And be bold enough to say, I want to fail So how, and my peers want to fail, and we want to innovate together. The young professional generation is a generation of collectiveness, and we need to tap into that. And it's by having them challenge us, for us to learn from them as well, and vice versa, that I think we can make steps into that space that will have created a more sustainable future of the workforce.
How bold it would be if the young professional would ask, how can you help me to fail?
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay. Excellent. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today and your insights. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Paco. I appreciate it. Me too.
Let's keep in touch. Bye-bye.
So, bye-bye.